The United States was responsible for 1/3 of the world's emissions in 1990. But Washington refused to sign, and other key members, like Australia and Russia, delayed passing the treaty. It was only in 2005, when Russia signed on, that the Kyoto Protocol officially came into force. Today, with only 3 years left on the treaty, the EU is the only major player expected to meet their targets. Another shortcoming of Kyoto was that developing countries like China, India and Brazil weren't required to meet the same cuts. The Copenhagen Agreement would reflect a growing awareness about climate change and a new world dynamic.
We're seeing a big shift in the politics and in the economics and in the business sentiment around this. I'm quietly confident that we'll get to where we need to get to.
It's been a long journey from Kyoto to Copenhagen, but where we ultimately end on this climate change issue remains a mystery.
An unusual sight for the fish. Government officials from the Maldives, a string of islands in the Indian Ocean, recently held their cabinet meeting underwater. The metaphor's pretty straightforward there. Well, the Maldives contingent may be amongst the most concerned about global warming effects, but they are hardly alone. A recent study by a London think tank estimates that 634 million people worldwide live in low-lying areas endangered by rising sea levels. And in places like Australia, 80% of the population could be at risk, since its major cities are all on the coast. But the biggest catastrophes could come in Asia. 75% of the people most vulnerable to flooding in the world live on that continent. And as Brooke Baldwin now shows us, past climate changes led to the collapse of one of the world's great empires.
In a place you've probably never heard of are whispered warnings from the ruins of a once great empire. This is Bantay Chamar, Cambodia. And project director John Sanday is leading CNN on a tour of its relics. It's the first time a professional television crew has been allowed at the site, and it is spectacular.
This is one of the most prized pieces of all Khmer art, and there's some really wonderful details in here. I love this piece, the image of the Buddha in one of the hands, the first of the hands. It's almost alive.
Sanday is currently leading a team of Cambodians to preserve its history.
So this is just a rough plan, actually, of what we're standing on, to give you some idea.
He says at its height, some 900 years ago, this city, along with Angkor Wat, helped make up the Great Khmer Empire.
The very size of this empire, people freely quote 1 million inhabitants in Angkor, for example. And you check it out as to, in your history books, as to the number of people, for example, in the city of London. And it was around 80,000.
So how did this mighty civilization end up in a heap of intricately carved rubble? According to Sanday and other leading scientists, the answer may lie partly with the weather and the water.
And it's certainly very evident in Angkor that there were major changes in the climate.
At around the same time, Europe was suffering through the Little Ice Age, starting in the 1300s. Southeast Asia was dealing with the impact of its own changing weather patterns.
It seems that here in Cambodia, there was likely that there was a drought, and the water systems were probably silting up, and as it's very evident that water plays a very important role. The weather changes had a fairly drastic effect on this area in particular.
Mega droughts exposed the empire to civic, economic, and military unrest, and eventually forced Khmer's rulers to leave their cities. John Sanday worries changes in the weather are already leading to changes in the way of life around Bantay Chamar.
I think that the importance of water is still critical, as critical as it was then. And we're faced with major problems.
The benefit for us, unlike the great empires of the past, the future of our great cities isn't yet written in stone. Brooke Baldwin, CNN.
Well, maybe that story inspired you to take action before it's too late. Well, we are giving you a chance. CNN and YouTube have partnered up to make sure that you have your say during COP15. We'll be broadcasting a 1-hour debate from the conference on December the 15th. We'll be relying on you to provide your questions for our panel. That includes the world's most respected leaders, activists and scientists. So head to youtube.com/COP15. Post your video with your name, where you're from, and ask the question that is most important to you. Well, that's it for the show. I do hope you've enjoyed it. You can always keep up with the latest innovative stories at www.cnn.com/goinggreen. And don't forget to get involved in that debate. That's youtube.com/COP15. Have your say. From me, Becky Anderson, here in Copenhagen, Denmark. We'll see you next time.